Go ahead.
Ah, okay. All right. Na screen yangu pia imeamka. Anyway, let's get started right now. I think now I'm in a good position to get started with this. So we'll be covering encryption and validation in this first session, and then in the other part we'll focus on authorization fully. So encryption and validation will be linked with what? With authentication. So let me first open the project that we are working on, and we are going to continue working on it right now. So let me open it from where we left yesterday, and we can continue. Let me also open my database because we'll write a few stored procedures because we are going to create a new table. And these stored procedures will be all about registering the user to the user table now. So let me share this screen too. Awesome. So, and then share now the whole screen. Great. So as usual, I'll start with the stored procedures first. And we're going to write some queries on these. So first thing, I need a table. So I need a table about a user. So I'll create a table for a user. Create table. I'll name it. There should be table. I'll name it user table. That way, it's going to have several columns and fields. So the first field will be ID. It will take some characters, and I'm going to give it 100 because yesterday we saw around 32. So 100 will work fine. And the second thing that I'm going to do is a name. Later on, maybe if we get some time, we can try to link the two tables so that they can work together and we don't have to repeat a lot of we are doing a lot of repetition in the book inside because since now we'll have two tables on the book inside, we can just have a user ID and after that we can now get the other details if we have the user ID as a foreign key there. So maybe we might modify that later, but not right now. So that thing will be an email. And this time it will be some characters, 300, not 3000. And I'll also add a unique attribute there just to make sure that each and every email is unique. So in case you try to add an email that already exists, it will give you an error. The last thing is a password. Actually, not the last. I'll also give a role. And for the role, I'm going to set defaults. I'm not going to pass it. So I'll just give a default of a user. So each and every person that registers to a system will be a user. If you have to update a user to be an admin, you can only do that through the database. So that's the role. And lastly now is passwords. So let's have password here. And this I'll give 150 to. And lastly, that table is done. So with this now, I can create my table in this airport database. So it's done. The first procedure that I'm going to write is about inserting a record into the database. So before even I write that, let me first save this table somewhere whereby our project is in the query. Node database tables, right, user table, that way. So let's write a new stored procedure now. So this stored procedure will be a create procedure. I'll name it register user. And first thing will be an ID. And I can actually copy this and just modify it. So I'll modify it and make sure that all these are in small. The other thing that I also need to modify is an email. I also need an email. That way. I don't need this unique now because it's already defined. I don't need the role because it's a default, but I need a password from the user. So I also need that password right there. So now, here we can write our procedure. I'm using a lot of, I'm mixing a lot of small letters and capital letters, but no worries. It's just SQL. So I'll do an insert into, and I'll say user table. And whatever I'm inserting is first thing I'm inserting ID. The second thing I'm inserting a name. The third thing I'm inserting an email. The fourth thing I'm inserting a password. And here are the values. So I have at ID right there. I have a name right there. I have email right there, and I have a password right there. That way. So this procedure is done. So I'll save it here. Okay. Here we messed up. Let's separate these procedures too. So I'll create a new folder inside stored procedures and name this booking procedures. And I love all these 4 procedures. Go there. And now I'll also create a new folder. This one I'll name it user procedures. So these someone can know which procedures belongs where. So if I was to save these, even before I save, let's first execute it and can save it now. I'll go to database procedures, user procedures, and I'll say register use. The second procedure, that is the first one, I'm only going to have 2. The second one is create procedure. And this will be get user by email. I'll just name it that way because that's what we'll be doing. And I'll say I'm going to get at email. And here in the procedure body, we are going to say select all. I select, yeah, you can select all, you can select some things. I'll show you which approach to use where. So we are going to use all, but it's also good to also select some specific attributes from user table. And I'll say where ID is equals to @ID. Not ID actually. Suppose select by email. And before you select by something, you have to make sure that it's super unique. So in our application, we'll be working or registering and logging in with an email. So when I'm going to log into an application, I'll be using an email. That's why I'm making sure that each and every user has a unique email. So I'm also selecting the user based on the email. So this procedure will be used somewhere else when we are trying to log in. And then this get user by email that way. Awesome. So let's execute this. And we have our procedure set now. So our table is right here. It is empty at the beginning. And we are going to populate it with some new users and awesome. Okay. I have these folders, but one thing that we have not handled is validation. For instance, I can add a booking and decide I won't give a name. I'll just leave it empty and send this request. Let me first npm start here to start our application. Sometimes concurrently fails on at first, but don't just give up. Just run it again. It will work. So I can now send these requests and I get a booking added. But we have a problem that this field is empty and we don't want, for example, it means that I can add a field where everything is empty and it will still work well. That way, you can see booking is added, but this is not what we want. Because now when we go to our procedures here and go to the booking and then get this get procedure and run this. First I'll execute use airport and run this. And select all from flight bookings here. You can see I have two records that are empty in my database and they have an ID. So we don't want this. We don't want someone who doesn't have a name because that doesn't exist. We don't want someone who is in our database and is not going anywhere. So we need to validate this. Now, how do we do this? We'll do this by making sure that the data is validated. Now, when it comes to validation, we have a library that is responsible for that. Just to make our work easier, there's a library that is responsible for this. So let's first check at the library. It's called Joy. It's called Joy. JOI npm. So this is the library or the package that is responsible for validation of this. So we just need to install it, create a schema. I'll tell you what a schema is, but a schema is just a set of validation rules, and define how we want everything to be structured. So that's what we are going to do right now, and we'll validate our data and just make sure that we can't add an empty booking. So first thing, it will be to install this library. And I'll do so by saying npm I joy. And joy doesn't need types. It's one of those libraries that are typed. And that's all. Now, I'm going to add a new folder into this folder structure that we had, and I'm going to call it helpers. So they're just going to help us with something. For example, validation, those kind of things. Inside there, I'm going to create a file and name it index.ts. And the first thing I'm going to do at the top is import join. That way. So now we have imported join. We are supposed to create a schema. So let's go back to this documentation of theirs and see how to create a schema. So a schema is just a complex word for some rules that we are going to follow. So here I'll say constant booking schema is equals to, and then I'll say joy dot object. And then inside here, I can say the list of properties that have to be there in our body. And secondly, some rules that they have to follow. When I talk about rules, I talk about things like this property is required. So this means that I can't ignore it. Secondly, another kind of a rule is this property should be a string. This means I can't pass a number, and it can be empty, all those kind of things. So the first thing that I'm going to start with in our validation, in our booking schema, is coming up with, is just defining these things here, not to always be required. So when we go back to our testing file here, we see that we need this. These four things must be there. So these are the four things that we are going to define the rules for. And I'll just remove the double quotes that way. So here on the left side, all the key will be the property, and on the right side, it will be the rules. So with the rules, you just need to say what? Let's see the documentation. It says joy dot something. So you start with the word joy that way, and you say dot what? First thing, if you want your, if for example, this is a name, we don't expect someone with a name that is of type number. Every name will be of type string. So first thing is this must be a string. So that's the first method that we execute on this. The second one is I don't want it to be always empty. So we say is a required property. And there are so many other properties here you can interact with. You can say even a minimum of this number of characters, a maximum of this number of characters. So those are some of the properties that you can use. And there also another property called a message, which you can also use. We'll use it later. So for all these properties here, just to make sure that we don't have an empty record, we are going to have all these all these are two method executed, that is string and required. And I should add an export there because we are not going to use it here. So, but for the email, I still need to add another rule that this must be an email. So I'll say email there. That way. So now this is how a schema looks like. It's not a complex thing. We just need to define the rules that each and every property must follow. Now let's use this schema. So I'll go to my controller and go to adding part here. So before I send this request, I first need to validate it. Now, how do we validate it? We validate it by saying the booking schema. So we first import the schema that we have just created and call a method called validate. And we pass in what it has to validate. So it has to validate a name, a email, travel date, destination. So all these are inside our request.body. So we can just pass validate our request.body that way. Now, when validation is done, this is supposed to give us something. So we can restructure something from this. One is an error, just in case the validation failed. And the other one is a value, which actually we won't use. So I won't go to that side. So in case there's an error, what should we do? So we say if there is an error, then what should we do? We should just return the user first thing status code saying there's an error. So anything for 100, and someone can get us the right status code about this for this operation. I'll just have for 100 first.
For 22.
For 22, okay. Which means unmute.
Let me get the actual description of it.
Okay. And then the error will just first log and see how an error looks like. So we are done with this. But let's see what happens here. When I send this request now, my application is still running, and I send this request, I get the first error message saying that email is not allowed to be empty. Why did it is supposed to start with the name actually? And this fails. Yeah, I've been wanting to show you this error. This says cannot set headers after they are sent to the client. Maybe I've mentioned it, but I haven't shown you, or it hasn't occurred in one of my previous sessions. So this error will come if you don't have this return statement here. If you have it, then the error won't appear. So that is how you can solve that error if it occurs. So now when you send this, you can see also name is not allowed to be empty. So this means that if I fill in my name here, that way, and send this request, it's going to give me now email is not allowed to be empty. So I say Elvis, but if I ignore and say, I ignore the @ and say elvisgmail.com and send this, still going to tell me about the email. Email must be a valid email. So I must add the @ Not that the email is validated just to know that EPT exists or not. No, it won't go to that extent, but it will just check some syntax about an email, that it must have an @ sign or a dot. So if I remove this dot too and send this, you can see still causing the same issue. So when I solve that and send the request, you see destination can be empty. So we add a destination. And lastly, you'll see that travel date is not allowed to be empty too. So we add a travel date that way. And now if we are going to send this request, we are going to see booking added. So if it's valid, then everything will work well. If not, you'll get those error messages. Awesome. That's about validating something using Joy. You're going to use this library a lot. Yeah, and I pause for some questions on validation. Rasmus?
Is it possible to specify how that library will validate maybe a password, maybe based on
Sorry?
certain? Is it possible to maybe instruct how the library will validate maybe a password using maybe certain regular expression rules?
Yeah, and we'll do that. That's Okanasam. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Does it check like when two people share the same name and maybe they must share the same, no, maybe the same person does two fake bookings. Will it check whether they are valid?
The same person does?
Assuming I have a booking in the morning and then a booking in the evening.
No, it's just going to validate the details. So maybe that you can handle with code, not with Joy. Obed. Okay, let's go to someone. As if Obed, you have a question, you can go after someone. Not audible. How do you? Oh, encrypt the password. We are going that. That's what we are doing next. Obed, you had a question, or you raised your hand by mistake, maybe? Oh, okay, Coco Chat. Please go back to how you implemented Joy. Okay, I'll go back to that. Onesmus, you have another question?
Yes. Should I ask? Jonathan, should I go ahead and
Yeah.
ask? No.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is maybe what if in the database table you had added a check maybe to check whether a certain field to check whether a certain field will be empty. So will that if will that error be catched in the try block, or what will happen? Maybe if you're not using Joey to validate.
Yeah. If you had not null, the error will be cached in the catch block. So it's a server-side error now. It still work.
Okay.
Obed is asking, please go back to how you implemented Joy. Okay. So first I started with defining a schema. I hope the schema is okay to you up to this point. Or should I re-explain it? You can use someone else, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I muted my other side of the one of the mic. Okay.
Okay. Awesome. So well, nice about adding a new one. Yeah. So what is happening here? We are using the schema that we have defined. Remember, in our schema, we define some rules that that each and every property has to follow. So we still have the properties and we still have the rules. So for name, we have it must be a string, it must be required. For email, we have it must be string required, it must be an email. So what validate does is check if whatever is given here, which is whatever is in the request.body, and our request.body contains a name, an email, a travel date, and a destination, follows the rules. Each and every property here must follow some rules in order for this validation to not fail. If it fails, then it's going to give us the error. So we are destructuring error from whatever this validation returns as. So then we are returning the error here. So you can even go ahead and say dot details. It's more of just getting the specific error, and then dot message that way. So right now, if I don't provide a name here and send these, you can see name is not allowed to be empty. So you just get the error straight. A question I expected is, what if you want to give a custom message instead of using their own messages? So you can still do that by using message. So they have a property called messages, actually messages. And you can say something like string. Let me check this syntax here. Message. Edit opened somewhere. Stack Overflow, so that I can show you other examples. Just a minute. I open this page. Awesome, I got it. So yeah, it is. I'll be sending this page. So now, first thing we can check when the string is empty. So this is the first check. Can say string dot empty. This means where nothing is provided. We can give you can't. Okay, let's say please add a name right there. Secondly, maybe you can try something else like we don't need to use the email. we don't have a pattern like regex or anything. Don't need to verify the length or anything. So let's try this with the email part so that we can check different errors. So I'll add it there. And then the second thing will be string dot email. So not a valid email that way. So these just providing your custom messages. And when we go back now to test our code here, and we don't provide an valid email and send these requests, you can see we are getting our custom message instead of getting their own. So this is also how you can rewrite the messages. And again, if I completely provide an empty string and send these, you can see it's please add a day. It should be an email. That way. So this is how you can provide custom messages if you need to. There are so many ways you can provide these if you want to target unique things like, yes, the email is empty, or the email is not empty, but it's not valid, because with the default way, we are all going to get one error message all through, or just for empty and valid. So you can give your own custom message and maybe explain more. So that's one thing that I expected to be asked. The other thing is, when now it comes to validation, would you do it on the front end or on the back end? And my answer is both. So just to be safe, do it both on the front end, and also on the back end too. All right, Obed, I hope your question is answered now.
Yes, it's answered.
Awesome. Any other question before we start on encryption? Honestly.
I have a question about security. How does Node.js deal with cross-site request forgery? For instance, in other frameworks such as Django, they insist a lot on adding a certain flag to check on cross-site request forgery.
Okay. I've seen that too in C#. I haven't checked how not they're dealing with it. So it's added to a form, right? It's added to when you're sending a post request. You add is it anti-forgery?
You add it to the form.
Yeah. To the with C# you add it to the requests that you're sending. I haven't checked with Node because I don't think it's a must to have, but it's just a recommended way. I'll check some video and maybe send it to you, and you can watch it and see if it's a must to have. I think the guy was explaining it's not a must to have. And let me just first check the video and send it to you, and you can check it. And because I don't remember everything from the video right now, so I'll just pin you the video and you can go through it, and maybe you'll get the answer right there. I'll also try to check the answer and maybe give you, because I've never done it, but I've done it with other things like C#. You have to use some annotation to check that for you.
Okay.
Elvis, you have an answer or a question?
Maybe to answer Onesma. So there is a package called Helmet. So when you want to, it has different types of security. You want to prevent the cause, the cross-site scripting, cross-site forgery. Like it has different ways of preventing those common types of security issues. So there's a package called Helmet.
Okay.
It's part of Express.
Oh, it's part of it.
Yeah. But you install it separately.
Oh, okay. Roy?
A question to Elvis. A dot helmet is used for SEO, search engine optimization. I've never heard of it being using a security part for, but okay, I use it for SEO in React. I'm sure about you, Node.js.
No, Helmet is for security. It's not for SEO. You don't have SEO on the back end. You have SEO on the front end.
All right. I think we can check on those packages. We can check on how Node is handling that, and maybe we'll all arrive at the same point, or if someone gets the right answer, or I think I'll try to agree with what Elvis has said, but we all stand correction right now. Okay. Now I'm trying to add a validation, not validation, sorry, but encryption. So when it comes to password encryption, first, you need to understand, why am I encrypting a password? And you can tell us, why do we need to encrypt a password, by the way? Why can't we just store it plainly? Yeah.
So just in case somebody gets hold of the database, the passwords, in case the passwords are not encrypted, they can get the values and use them and try use them for other sites. Maybe now you have it's more insecure because now compared to when it's encrypted. Now when it's encrypted, the users, the passwords, the values are not stored as the users key them in, so they're stored differently, and it's hard to decrypt and try and access other users' sites.
Okay, awesome. That's good. Someone else wants to try. All right, we can just get started immediately into this. Now, for this, I'll add a new controller. And this controller will be dealing with only authentication. So I'll just name it auth controller. That way. So what we'll have here is registering a new user and being able to log in a user. Those two things only. And with those two things, we can cover encryption. So first I'll copy some things like these imports at the top. That way. And we also need a library for these. There's a library that is specific dealing with encryption and decryption. And this library is called bcrypt. So there are two. We have bcrypt and we have bcrypt.js. So I'll be using bcrypt because it's better than bcrypt.js. You can check the difference of between the two, but they still achieve the same thing anyway. But bcrypt is better, more secure than bcrypt.js. We'll check on the reasons as to why. So the first thing I need to install this library right there. And I think this needs types, if I'm not wrong. That way. So let's just give it some time to install. Now, what will happen here is I will continue on as it is installing. I'll have something here. I'll be working on something. So I'll export a function. And this function is called register user. That way. So registering a user, we have a request and should be of type extended request, which I'm yes to get that interface, and response, which will be of type response. I'm not changing that, and we can now create first this interface. So we'll have an interface and name it extended request. It's going to extend the request that we have. So it's going to have all the characteristics of the request that we have, and we can override and we can add new characteristics. Awesome. So with this extended request first, I just need to type the body, and this body must have what? So I'll go back to our SQL, whatever we defined our database, and see that the body must have a name, an email, and a password. Those three are the must have. So we must have an email of type string, and lastly, we must have a password of type string. So this is registering a new user. So a user must have a name, an email, and a password. Cool. So right here, for the ID, I'll still use UUID to generate our ID, to generate an ID for us. So I'll say first constant ID is equals to UID and execute that. So after executing this, it will give us a unique ID. And then I'll go on to constant and I'll create a connection pool. I'll say await, which makes now we never add an async function here. And second thing is that we need try catch. And the last thing, I'll just copy the message that is there. That is the response here, and paste it there. That is for the catch block. So now I'll await and I'll say MSSQL dot connect, and I'll pass in the SQL configuration that we have there. So I'm repeating a lot of code. Won't be an issue. Tomorrow we'll refactor all this code and it will look better and well formatted and written. So after this, I will await. So to register, I don't need to get something back. This is because I'm posting data to the database. I'm not getting data, so I don't need to save anything. I'll just say pull.request right there. And I will now add some, and I'll copy this. This one. And the first input is for ID. Is an event listener. First input is an ID. The second one is name. The third one email. The fourth one is a password. And those are the four things that we need because role is going to be default. We are going to use the default value. So for these, I need to get them. I need to get the values that I'm using from somewhere. And this somewhere is request.body. So I can get some things from the request.body. And one of the things that I'll get is a name. The other one is an email. We are getting this suggestion because we have strong text. And the last one is a password. But before all these, and let me first finish these execute, and we need a procedure here. So here's our procedure here. Just pass the name of the procedure right there. So that's the process of executing. And maybe at the end, I'll just say status, and this is 201, and JSON, and a message, user registered, that way. Now, unless you have a question.
Will you mind including validation?
Yeah, that's where we're going. So I'll now write the validation schema. So I'll create a new schema. I'll say constant validation is equals to joy dot object. It should be joy. Awesome. This one. So after this, I'll just validate the name the same way we have just done it. The email the same way that we have just done it. But for the password, we'll try to use something different. Well, not super different. First, it will be a string. And then it will be required to. And lastly, we must have a certain pattern. So this is how you add some regular expressions here or rejects. I'm not a big fan of rejects. And Onesmus, can you give us a rejects that will include numbers, must have a capital letter, must have 8 characters, must have a special character, and must have a number? Before add one, let me search for it somewhere. Unless someone can give us right away this regex expression and it's supposed to look. So let's try to use this guy's Stack Overflow again. Let me share this link. I use these when I want to validate a password with regex. So there's a guy who explained it. This guy. So this guy explained it well. And what it is should contain at least a capital letter, should contain at least a small letter, must contain at least a number, should contain at least a special character, and minimum length is 8 here. So so for password, you can see even with the docs, we can follow this pattern. So from the docs, I think this is must contain a number. Okay, it must be in between 3 and 30. So the length must be in between 3 and 30 and can contain numbers and text. There's no special character. I don't think so. But let's use this guy ways of validating so that we can have a strong validation for this. So for this, we'll say new regex. It rejects or rejects expression. Let's check the docs. Yeah, rejects expression. And then inside here, you're supposed to give some expression in quotes. So this is the expression for our password, which means must contain some small characters here. This means must contain some capital letters. This means must contain some numbers, and this means must contain some special characters. And the last part here means that the minimum length must be 8. If regex is confusing, it's totally okay. To me, so it's also confusing. So let's validate our body. So I'll say login schema. Did I export it first? Oh, it's validation schema. I'll name it registration schema. Let's call it registration schema.validate. And I'll go to request of body. So we can get the error right there. And we say if there's an error, then press return so that we can avoid that. Can't send headers after they are set error. Response dot status. I'll give these what 422 again. And JSON saying the error is here. This is the details at line 0. So can also get the message that way. So this is how we are validating our request. But before we do that, we don't have a URL, not a URL. We don't have a route for that for our user site. And also we have not linked it to the start file. So I'll link them differently. So I'll have a new file and I'll name it outroutes. Supposed to be .ts. Oh. That way. And what we're supposed to do first is say constant, not even constant. Yeah, we can just say constant route is equals to route from express. And I'll name this out router. So Cynthia, which method are we supposed to use here? For registration. Cynthia.
Yes. Pardon the
Wait.
question.
Which method am I supposed to type here?
Post. I'm not sure.
Post. Okay, these are post method because we are sending data to the database. So now I've created a new set of routes that will be only for authentication. And I'm also adding some extra path there, and this will be added on top of our main path. But if we go back to our starter file, we see that this route is calling for the routes here for the booking. And now we have a new file in the router that is going to deal only with the out routes. So how do we do this? We just need to say app.use again. And this time we are going to use a main file, a main path of users like users/registration, that means that, or even let's not use users, let's use auth/registration means that I'm referring to the, it's going to execute the registration request handler, or sorry, route handler. So we are pointing it to the auth router. And that's all. Now we can test our API. It's wired up well. So let's go here and define some set of rules. I'll copy this one and go to the bottom here. And I'll say users/register. I love that remain. I love a name, an email, and a password. I've not yet encrypted this. I'm just testing it. So let's see what happens if we type a password and it's empty. Unexpected token. In JSON at line 89. Okay, let's go back and see what the issue is. I'll come to Vera's question in a few. So right here we have a function register, and I'll first comment this to just handle the validation. And maybe you can see what the issue is here. So I'll go back to this and okay, we had an issue here, unexpected token here. Okay, that must be an error about this. About this last com. Be careful with this library, with this API. If you have a comma at the end, it will give you this error. And actually, it's a good thing that it happened. So let's now send it. Cannot post to user/register. It's because it's supposed to be users, not user. If we go back to this, it's actually out, not even users. It's out large register. Yeah, that's the path. So now let's test this. I'm hoping it's going to give us an error. So you see now, first you'll get a message that password is not allowed to be empty. So I pass in something and send this. You get password must match this now syntax. So let's now type a valid password. So I'll have a capital T. It will be try me. And I'll have an @ there. Okay, 2023 actually. And a $, and see if it's still going to cause problem. These are 8 characters, more than 8 actually. And they have a $, they have a capital letter, they have small letter, they have a number. So let's send this, and you can see that still giving us this issue. Let's see if there's anything that we never passed. From here, minimum length must contain a special character, should contain at least a number. Okay, see these. Try me, that is 5 characters. And send these. Still are getting the same error. Let's add some numbers there. Send these. Actually not getting an error, maybe because I never I commented the code. So let me uncomment this code. And see what will happen after this if we uncomment this code. And I'll also have a return statement there. So let's try this. I'm hoping it's going to work well now. So yeah, you can see the user is registered. So it wasn't an issue. It's just because we never had something to do after the validation. So if we go back to our database and select these and execute, yes, we have a user here, but we are not yet there on encryption. But we'll get there. So let me go back to Vera's question. Can we validate attributes we want to be unique, e.g. email with Joy? No, because Joy is just a library. It's not communicating with your backend. It's just checking for certain rules if they are enforced. It's just enforcing some certain rules. So for validating an email, if it's unique, you have to do that with a database, or when you are trying to enter a user or register a user, you first check if it exists. So two ways: using the unique attribute, or even before before registering a new user, you first check if the email exists. Write them. So with Joy, no. Any question up to this point? How about sites which check whether an email exists? For instance, you input an email that doesn't exist, it throws an error. Which library do they use? I'm not sure about the library, because I think for that information to be given, it has to come from, who is the owner of Gmail? Is it Google or whatever? Not Google. Yeah, it's Google. So that data has to come from Google. I'm hoping there's a library for that. I'll also check that, but I've not used any library for that so far. So I'll check it anyway, unless you use a different type of authentication. Maybe you are able to counter this kind of issues. But this local authentication won't check that. Okay, Conan.
When a user is registering, if we want to have a confirm password field, would we need to add that field in the database, or Bcrypt can handle that? Or Joy, I mean.
Joy can handle that. Joy.
Could you show us how to do it?
Yeah. But I won't add that column to the database. I'll just show you by that example on the website. So if we go to this, in their schema, they have username, password, repeat password. And for this, for repeat password is referencing to the password. So they must be the same for each to pass this validation, because if we go to ref here, Mopin is talking more about it. So what is happening here? It's making sure that whatever you are referencing to are the same. So just a minute, is this the same or referencing? Oh yeah, it's referencing to the same thing. Just need to check. Joy, I'll check the check here passwords. The other option will be just to do it with code. Let me see what the method Joy has and see if there's any which looks like it can relate to a scenario here. So equal. Yeah, I'll use this. So assuming I had a confirm, right there, I'll check and I'll say if joy dot equal, and then I'll use reference ref from joy, and I reference to password. Okay, so now let's add a property in our OD. And I'll say this is confirm. Of type string. And then you can also deal with what confirm password now. That way. So right now, if I go back to this and send this request, it will say that okay, these are just a violation of a unique key right there. Okay, these are registered. Yeah, it can register user because we are not getting the confirmation. That we are not using the confirm user, confirm password. But let's try to have confirm password and it's empty. So you can see confirm password might be a reference of password. So if we try something else here and send this, you can see it might be a reference. So let's try the same thing. Yeah, so now you see it's passing that stage of validation and giving us some violation of unique key, which is coming from the database because you are using the same email to register a user. We are the email is unique. That's why we are getting this violation of unique key. Or cannot insert duplicate key in this part for this email. So if we could undo confirm, I could maybe undo it that way. That's okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Any other question before we go to encryption? Encryption is super easy. So we have a library for that. And it's called bcrypt. did I install it? Yeah, I had installed it. So this library is going to help us in validating this. So how do we validate how do we encrypt a password? Is just one line of code and everything is done. So I'll just have a constant there called hashed password. And I'll use a wait because hashing a password takes time. So I'll await, and at the top here, I'll import something, which is bcrypt from bcrypt, and I'll use that library to hash the password. So I'll call it here, say bcrypt dot hash. And I'm supposed to pass in two things. First thing is the plain text. So the plain text is password. Whatever we have in the body is the plain text. Plain text means the password that is not yet hashed. And the second thing is salt rounds. Let me talk about salt rounds. So salt rounds are the number of rounds we are going to encrypt this text. So if I say, and don't give above 10, it will delay your application somewhere. So if I give 10, it means that this text, which in our case we had try me, like that text there, that was our password, will be encrypted 2 to the power 10. So that will be encrypted 1,000 times. It will be encrypted those number of times. So salt rounds is just a value that is used. It's just a cost factor that is going to determine the number of times that we use to encrypt. Secondly, how safe it is. So the higher the number of salt rounds, the higher the security of the password. But for this case, we are going to use 10 because 10 is going to encrypt our password 1,000 times. So this password will be encrypted once until we get to 1,000 times. So that's all we need. But now instead of passing the password, we just need to pass the hashed password. That's it. I think that's all. So let's try this by registering a new user. And must give a unique email, right then. I'll first delete everything here. Don't need to have an hashed passwords. And I'll send this. So I get user registered. When I select the user table right now, I can see I have a password hashed there. So if we still use the same password, we are not going to get the same hash. We're going to get different hashes, even if we have the same text there. So if I register here and have Elvis now, because I had previously dropped, so that won't be an issue. The same password, we get the same, we get a success state. And if I go back here and I don't know if I can expand this. If I can increase the text, that's what I mean. Okay, I'm not able to, but these two are different, but we know that this is the same password. And you can see there's a 10 somewhere there. That 10 shows the number of rounds used to hash this password. That's all about hashing a password. Just need to cover the login side and we'll see how to compare the two. Any question before we go to login? Any question? I'm waiting for some questions.
A question. Um, is it good to include the process of encrypting a password in a middleware?
Encrypting a password in a middleware.
Yeah, for instance, before maybe maybe a middleware will change the password field and encrypt it and maybe for the request.
So how will you be able to access the request.code in that case? Because think of a middleware, something that you're going to add here. Okay, you can still access it because it's intervening everything. I will answer it with a yes. You can do that.
Is it recommended?
That's just writing complex code to me. Because not involving a middleware is like you're intervening the requests and getting the body, hashing the password, and calling the next function so that the middleware can continue executing and passing that data again to the backend. Yes, it can still work, but there's some complex way of writing code. I won't recommend it personally because it's just complicating the logic more than just writing a simple logic which can still solve the same thing. More lines of code. We just have one line of code right now. So complicating it, unless you have a reason. So I'll go with the simple way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other question before we check on this login? Okay. So I'll copy some things there. But now validation will change. So we just need to validate because this is login. Yeah.
I have a scenario maybe where one may be forced to use middleware. For instance, what if you are registering a user and you need to upload their profile picture? So will that force you to maybe use a middleware when you are registering a user?
And what will be the purpose of the middleware?
Just to maybe upload the image and give you back the URL before saving to the database the registered user.
Okay, you can do that with first calling for example, if you are using an API to upload the image somewhere, you can first call the API and it will give you the URL, and then you can now continue with that process. It will be easier to write the code than writing a middleware to do that.
Okay.
Right. Let's copy this because I'm reusing it, and I'll remove the confirmed password and the name there because I have validate these two, and I'll call this login schema. So This is what I'm going to use here. Login scheme. So with this, I'm going to get the email and the password, because to log in, you just need an email and a password. And the rest you can let me write first a statement here. Return press dot. Okay, let's first not write it. I'll wire this up first with my router. And Brian, tell me the method that I'm using here for this. Which method am I going to use for login?
Post.
Why post?
Because you're logging in as a new user.
Sorry, your mic is a bit loud.
You're logging in as a new user.
Your mic is too loud.
Am I audible?
Yeah, but your mic has background noise. Just type the answer. So I have my login method there, and I'll go and test it here. Here, give me the path that I'm supposed to write here.
Pardon?
Give me the path that I'm supposed to write here.
I'll pass it to someone else.
Okay. You're supposed to write login right there at the end. And let's test this. I'm just testing if this route is working. I'm sure it should be working now. So let me send this request again. Okay, we'll deal with it later. So let's just continue on or try to add a password that is not valid. So you get that error. So that's what I was trying to test here. So now let's go back and continue the login process. So we have just checked on validation. And we need to check on the next thing. So the next thing will be first to check if the email exists. So I'll say constant I'll execute a stored procedure. So we wrote a stored procedure to get user by email. So I'll say user is equals to await, and then I'll say another await request. dot input, and the input will be email, and the value is email, and then dot execute. And I'll execute this method, this procedure then. It should be pull dot request. And lastly, after this is done, I want to get the record set that is returned. Then, so what I have here is an array of object if the user exists. If it doesn't exist, then I have nothing. So I'll say status. I want us to test this step by step. And I'm going to return this. So now let's test if we can get the user records or not. So I'll send these requests, and for sure I get a record. So if I try a user that doesn't exist, I'm getting an empty array. So we are good up to that point so far. So now, since I have the records, I can say that if, let's add the if here, if user at index 0, if there's no user at index 0, this means that probably I got an empty array. Not probably, I got an empty array. So I'm supposed to send back an error. And be careful with your error messages. Don't give straightforward errors like email is invalid. No, don't give those kind of errors. Just give a distinct error that a hacker can't know what you're talking about. You can just say user not found. So you want to know if it's the email that is wrong or the password. That way. So let's try this and see what we have right now. So when I have a valid user, I get the details. When I don't have a valid user, I get what? User not found. So we have achieved one step of the login process. The next step is super simple, just comparing the password. So now we have compared the email. What about the password? So I'll say constant valid password, and this value of valid, and this value will hold a boolean that is returned from bcrypt. So bcrypt goes ahead and gives us a way in which we can compare password. So it's comparing a hashed password and an hashed password. So the plain text and also the hashed password. And it's going to give you a true if they are the same or a false if they are not the same. So I'll say password and I'll compare it. This is my plain text. I'll compare it with user at index 0, then dot password. I should strong type this first. So let me go back to my models here and say export class user. And I'll copy these and remove the unnecessary. I don't have a destination, so I'll replace this with a password. Have ID name, email, password, row. So that is my structure of a user. Now I need to import this here. So I'll say import user from models. So now I can strong type whatever I get here. So I can say this will be a user array. So now me checking on password won't exist, but a capital P will do better. Okay, so after this, we need to just to check if valid. So I said these returns a Boolean. If they are true, it will be a Boolean. If they are true, if it compares and finds that these are the same, gives us a true, else gives us a false. Now, I'll check for a case where it's not valid, and I'll give the same error here, user not found. That way. And now for success state, I'll just say message, and I'll give in user log in. That way. Okay, so let's test this and see what happens. So when I have a valid user and send, I'll get user logged in. If I modify this and delete the email, first it will give me a validation issue. But if I add a 3 there instead of a 23, you see user not found. We know that the email is valid, but the password is not. But we are getting the same messages for both. So if I enter a valid one, you can see I'm logging. If I enter a wrong email there, it will give me a user not found. So that's a login process. All right, any question? Any question? Hakuna swali, kila mtu ameelewa on login. Yes, master.
Kuna place sijaelewa. When you are ukilogin, bado unaangalia pattern ya password.
I'm just comparing. I'm comparing the hashed and the unhashed. That is the plain text. And bcrypt is allowing you to do that using a method here called compare.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also checking on the pattern just to make sure that it follows the pattern that we defined, that a capital letter or those kind of things. So that is the validation. Yeah.
During login.
Yeah.
Is it required?
No, it's not required. Actually, I don't think it's also required because you're also communicating about how the structure of your password looks like. I'll actually remove it.
Okay.
Maybe you can check on things like the email follows a certain order. Okay, I'll just check on required only, just to make sure that someone must provide for me an email. So that will make sense. The regex part is not required. Actually, that is communicating something or conveying some information to someone, like an hacker, because he knows that this password must be in this format. So I'll just have it required. And for the email also the required part too, just to make sure that you must provide an email and a password. All right, we'll pick up from here. Should we do it from 12 or from 2? Kindly suggest on that. Ian says 2, Christian 2. From 12, sorry. To 12, Cynthia. Okay, 2, 2, 2. I think that 2 will have it. Let's meet at 2.